Jael, the woman who killed a general. The tent in the shadows, when obscurity meets opportunity. Her name wasn't on any battlefield roster. She didn't carry a sword. She wasn't dressed for war. She wasn't expected to do anything but pour milk, tie tent ropes, and blend into the background. But heaven had already taken note. While kings clashed and soldiers bled, a tent stood silent on the margins, and inside that tent was a woman history hadn't seen coming. Her name was Jael, a wife, a homemaker, a woman of apparent peace, yet destined for a war she didn't start and a glory she never asked for. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, most blessed of tent-dwelling women. Judges 5 verse 24. She had no throne, no title, no prophecy announcing her significance. And yet, God placed the turning point of a national victory in her hands. Sometimes the greatest divine interruptions come when you're just minding your business in the tent. We first meet Jael not in action, but in context. Her husband, Heber, was a Kenite, a clan of nomadic people, descendants of Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. They weren't Israelites, but they weren't enemies either. They were in-betweeners, the kind of people who lived in the tension between alliances. Heber had made peace with Jabin, the Canaanite king who had oppressed Israel for 20 years. In other words, he chose the side of power. But Jael chose the side of justice. Let this ring loud. You can live in a house of compromise and still make a decision for righteousness. God doesn't need your background to be perfect. He needs your heart to be ready. Jael was tucked away, unnoticed, and likely underestimated. But the God who sees in secret had already marked her as his instrument. If you've ever felt like your role was too small, if you've ever believed your tent-dwelling life wasn't qualified to change anything, let Jael's tent shake your assumptions. Say this with boldness: He can use my obscurity for his victory. Jael wasn't on the mountain with Deborah. She wasn't in the valley with Barak. She was in a tent, with dirt floors, everyday tools, and no idea that history was about to knock on her door. And yet, the movement of heaven was not limited to kings and commanders. It was coming for her. Because God doesn't just anoint those in armor. He anoints those in aprons. Those in ordinary routines. Those in places that seem far from battle but close to obedience. God was setting a trap. Not in the palace, but in a tent. With a woman. With a purpose she hadn't yet discovered. Whisper this over your daily life: my tent is not too small for a divine assignment. When Deborah sang her victory song, she didn't praise Barak. She didn't glorify the army. She sang of Jael. Because heaven doesn't forget the ones who obey in silence. The women who strike in hiddenness. The ones who don't get headlines but carry out holy assignments in the shadows. You may feel like you're in the background of someone else's war. But your obedience is being written into heaven's song. Don't despise your tent. Don't curse your quiet place. That space may be where the greatest victory begins. If you're reading this in a season where your life feels small, uneventful, or unseen, know this: God specializes in finding warriors in the most unexpected places. And like Jael, your moment may not come with a trumpet, but it will come with a door. And when it opens, what you do next may echo into eternity. If Jael's tent reminds you of your own hidden season, share this with someone waiting to be used by God. Comment below: what's your tent? Where has God placed you in this season? And speak this aloud with faith: I may be hidden now, but I am not forgotten. I am a warrior in waiting. The flight of a warrior, when power knocks on your door. He was supposed to be invincible. The ironclad general. The one whose 900 chariots terrorized Israel for 2 decades. His name carried fear. His presence guaranteed defeat. His army was unmatched and his victories were many. His name was Sisera. But on this day the mighty had fallen. The rains had come. The rivers had risen. And his chariots, his pride and confidence, had become traps in the mud. Barak and the Israelite army had descended with divine timing, and Sisera ran. Not like a warrior, but like a man stripped of his certainty. And he ran in one direction, toward Jael's tent. He wasn't looking for God. He was looking for safety. But what he would find in that quiet space would become the unraveling of his legacy. Sisera ran to what he believed was a neutral zone. Heber the Kenite, Jael's husband, had made peace with King Jabin. So in Sisera's eyes, Jael's tent was a refuge, a place to regroup, to hide, to catch his breath. But what he didn't know was this: heaven had already claimed that tent for a different purpose. When power knocks on your door in desperation, will you recognize the divine setup? Jael was not caught off guard by Sisera's arrival, because prepared hearts are never surprised when purpose shows up dressed as disruption. She stepped outside and met him. "Come in, my lord. Don't be afraid." She said it calmly. She didn't tremble. She didn't hesitate. She offered him the illusion of safety, but her soul had already chosen sides. Sometimes obedience starts with a welcome that the world misinterprets. It's not agreement, it's strategy. And in that moment, Jael wasn't just being kind, she was aligning herself with divine justice. Sisera entered, exhausted, disarmed, unaware that the most dangerous place he could be was not the battlefield, but the home of a woman whose courage had been quietly forming. He asked for water. She gave him milk. He asked for protection. She gave him a blanket. He believed he was in control. But the tent belonged to someone God had already anointed for this very moment. The image of the beast doesn't have to look like a robot. It can look like anything we give our allegiance to, anything that shapes our worldview, silences dissent, and punishes resistance. Think, what shapes your beliefs right now? Who tells you what's true? What image has your attention, your time, your trust? Say this out loud, slowly. Lord, help me not just recognize the beast, but refuse to worship its image. Because that's the part many miss. It's not just about identifying technology, it's about recognizing idolatry. The enemy doesn't need machines to deceive the world. He only needs images, narratives, patterns, stories that sound like truth but twist it, systems that elevate man and erase God. And technology, including AI, is simply the newest megaphone. But remember, no matter how lifelike the image appears, it is still an imitation. Only God gives breath. Only Christ speaks words that heal. Only the Spirit leads into all truth. If this helped you see Revelation 13 in a clearer light, share it. There's too much fear-driven confusion out there. Comment below. What image has tried to steal your attention lately? Tag someone who's been curious or concerned about AI and prophecy. And declare this over your life. I worship no image but the living God. I follow no voice but the shepherd's. I bow to no system but the kingdom. Code, control, and the mark. What we're missing about the beast. For years, Christians have watched technology like hawks. Scanning chips, microcodes, implantable devices, digital IDs. Every new innovation becomes a suspect. Every scan at the store, every camera on the corner, every biometric update sets off alarm bells. Is this the mark of the beast? It's not a foolish question. Revelation 13 verses 16 to 17 makes it plain. It also forced all people to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark. It sounds eerily familiar in an age of digital wallets, face recognition, and AI-powered identity systems. Buying and selling tied to approval. Access tied to allegiance. Feels like prophecy staring through your phone screen. But if we stop at the barcode, we might miss the real warning. Because the mark isn't just about commerce. It's about control. The beast system isn't interested in data. It's after devotion. The mark isn't merely a physical imprint. It's a spiritual signature. It's allegiance. It's surrender. It's a world system demanding that your loyalty belong to it, or else. And that system is already here. No, it may not be a microchip in your hand. But it shows up every time people are silenced for not conforming. Every time truth is replaced with popularity. Every time platforms push you to agree or be erased. Every time loyalty is extracted by fear, not love. The real mark isn't just skin deep. It's soul deep. Yes, technology may play a role. But the deception is far older. Pharaoh needed no chip to enslave Israel. Nebuchadnezzar didn't need an algorithm to make men bow to his statue. The early church faced beasts in the form of empires, emperors, and ideologies, and they resisted not with code but with conviction. We are not called to panic over plastic and passwords. We are called to discern what system we are submitting to. AI, if misused, can certainly accelerate control. But the question is not whether your phone is spying on you. The question is, whose voice are you letting guide your choices? The mark was never just about economics. It was about worship. And before you start looking at scanners and chips, ask yourself, have I already given my thoughts and my actions over to something that doesn't carry the Spirit of God? Because that's the real mark, a mind and hand governed by something other than the kingdom. Say this now with conviction. I give no system my worship. I give no beast my loyalty. My allegiance is to Christ alone. We're living in the prelude of something. The ground is shifting. But discernment, not fear, must be our compass. The early church overcame not because they avoided marks, but because they bore a different one, the seal of the Holy Spirit. They resisted the beast by knowing the real Christ. And so must we. This part brought clarity, share it. The world needs less fear-mongering and more truth-telling. Comment below, where have you felt pressure to conform in today's culture? Tag someone asking the deeper questions. And declare this, my heart will not be marked by fear. My mind will not be owned by control. I belong to Jesus, the Lamb, not the beast. Wisdom in the age of wonders. Discernment, not denial. The world is no longer impressed by magic. It's governed by marvels. We carry artificial minds in our pockets. Ask them anything and they answer in milliseconds. They write, design, predict, translate, create. The impossible is now standard. The miraculous has been mechanized. And the church stands blinking, asking, should we be amazed, afraid, or both? Revelation 13 warns us of a time when signs and wonders will deceive the world. It performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. Because of the signs it was given power to perform, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. Revelation 13 verses 13 to 14. We often read that as purely supernatural. But what if the deception isn't just mystical? It's technological. What if fire from the sky is no longer a prophet's miracle, but a feature of modern warfare? What if the signs we marvel at now are the very ones that dull our discernment? The enemy is cunning. He knows he doesn't need to make people worship him directly. He only needs to keep them enthralled, distracted by wonders, addicted to speed, seduced by convenience, numbed by noise. The more the world is amazed, the less it stops to discern. And this is where the church must wake up. We don't need to abandon technology. Because when you say yes to God in moments that defy logic or comfort, you will carry the tension. The very thing that made you obedient may make you misunderstood. And still, obedience is worth it. Jael wasn't trying to be a hero. She wasn't looking for a legacy. She wasn't thinking of songs or scripture or history books. She was thinking of righteousness, of deliverance, of justice long overdue. She was thinking of the mothers who had cried out under Sisera's cruelty, the women he had violated, the children he had orphaned. She was thinking of the 20 years Israel groaned under oppression, and how the hand of a woman could bring it to an end. Sometimes, to stop the cycle of violence, a woman must choose the harder path. Not because she loves violence, but because she fears God more than she fears the opinions of men. Jael's tent would never feel the same again. She would always remember the weight of the hammer, the crack of the peg, the silence that followed. But she would also remember the shift in the heavens, the moment when her tent became sacred ground. Not because it was clean or pretty, but because God had moved through her hands. You see, the tools God gives us don't come without a weight. But neither does compromise. Jael could have turned away. Could have said, "Not my problem." Could have hidden Sisera and lived in false peace. But she chose to feel the discomfort of obedience over the ease of neutrality. If you've ever made a decision that cost you comfort, your relationships, your reputation, your sleep, because God asked you to stand, to speak, or to strike where injustice was hiding, Jael's story is your mirror. She reminds us that the glory of obedience isn't always in the applause. It's in the aftermath. When the dust settles and the tent feels still, but your spirit knows, "I did what God asked of me." Say it with quiet conviction. I'd rather be obedient and uncomfortable than silent and complicit. When Deborah sang of the victory, she didn't gloss over Jael's act. She honored it. She called it blessed. Not just the result, but the method, the woman, the hands that struck a blow others feared to deliver. Most blessed of women be Jael, not because she killed a man, but because she obeyed when the moment required more than comfort. She chose justice over fear, action over avoidance, courage over compromise. And isn't that what God is still looking for? Not perfect warriors, but faithful stewards. Those who will use what's in their hands, even when it doesn't make sense, even when it costs sleep, even when it ruins their reputation in the eyes of men but seals their honor in the heart of God. If this echoes in your spirit, share it. Encourage the one walking through the aftermath of bold obedience. Leave a comment. What decision did you make that cost comfort but kept you faithful? And speak this over yourself. Even if my obedience costs me comfort, it will not cost me my calling. A song and a legacy. Why heaven remembered her name. The battlefield had gone quiet. The chariots rusted in the mud. The soldiers had returned to their homes, their hearts swollen with relief. Israel at long last had peace. But the victory did not end with a sword. It ended with a tent. And with a woman whose name echoed not through shouts of warriors, but through the song of a prophetess. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Most blessed of tent-dwelling women. That's what Deborah sang. And Israel listened. Because when God writes a song, he includes the names we forget. The women the world overlooks. The acts of obedience no one sees except him. Jael had no tribe leading the charge. No army standing behind her. No prophet announcing her role. But she had something far greater. She had availability. And that was enough to make history sing. In a culture where women were rarely praised for acts of boldness, Jael's name broke the mold. Not because she fit the mold, but because she shattered it. She did not stand at the front of an army. She kneeled in the corner of a tent. And still, God honored her more than kings. Legacy isn't always built on platforms. Sometimes it's built in private places with trembling hands and quiet yes. It's built when a woman chooses purpose over propriety. When she steps into the moment and doesn't flinch at the cost. When she silences evil not with status, but with resolve. That is the legacy Jael left. Not of titles, but of testimony. Not of fame, but of faithfulness. Deborah's song wasn't just a victory chant. It was a declaration. a way of marking forever that Jael's moment mattered, that the blow she struck in the solitude of her tent reverberated in the heavens. How many battles are still being won because someone like Jael obeyed when it didn't feel glamorous? How many stories will be written in eternity about women and men who never made the news, but made history with their obedience? Jael teaches us that victory sometimes walks into your tent disguised as inconvenience. And when it does, what you choose to do will echo louder than you imagine. This isn't about violence. It's about vigilance. About being so attuned to the Spirit that when the moment comes, you don't hesitate to act. You don't negotiate with evil. You don't protect the thing God intends to end. You stand firm. You use what's in your hand. And you trust that heaven is watching. And heaven was watching Jael. Her name, once unknown, became immortalized in the sacred poetry of Scripture. Her obedience became a line in a song that has been read for generations. A legacy not built on public victories but private obedience. If you feel forgotten, hidden, or like your obedience hasn't been noticed, hear this: heaven keeps better records than earth. God sees every time you choose integrity over applause. Every time you obey in secret. Every time you say yes when it costs you comfort. And He remembers. Say this aloud with boldness: I am seen. My obedience matters. My tent is part of the story. And if this story has awakened something in you, share it with someone who feels hidden in their own tent. Comment below. What hidden act of obedience shaped your journey? Tag someone whose faithfulness you admire, even if no one else notices it. Because the world may never sing your name, but heaven already has. And like Jael, your obedience might be the verse someone else's victory is written on. Her tent was temporary, but her name? Eternal. So will yours be if you say yes when history comes knocking?